Hello and welcome to a very special live episode of Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, August 5th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 26 days, the game against Michigan in 117 days. We're going to have to put all the excitement about the Akron game to the side for a little bit. We have some big news we've been waiting on for quite a while. Some news on the NCAA's investigation into the Connor Stalions affair and all of the related issues around that. A report from ESPN's Dan Murphy and Pete Thamel laid out a bunch of information. We're going to be talking about that. Tony Gerdeman at BuckeyeHuddle.com is here. And Tony, this is one of these fascinating things which thankfully doesn't apply to wider American society on the whole. Everyone looked at this and everything, no matter where they were coming from, Tony, this just proved that they were right all along.
Yeah, very much so. What you can do is, if you're defending Michigan, you can latch on to a particular line or line of thinking and say, see, we told you, while ignoring everything else going on, all of the other things. And there's quite a lot in this report from ESPN that is it's related to Stalions, but also there's an allegation that former linebackers coach Chris Partridge urged a player or players to not be forthcoming about the Stalions thing, and there's layers to this onion in terms of what you're looking for, what you're finding, and sometimes the things that you're finding aren't even what you're looking for, which is usually one of the big dangers of having the NCAA start digging around.
Yeah, and this is not the final version of Notice of Allegations. This is just a draft. I saw Sue in the comments saying, "Here's the laws. Don't worry. We have new slides. We have new bylaws. We're not Big Penn rules anymore. We're talking NCAA rules." So I have some new bylaws to read to you, but let's start with the ESPN report. Again, a report from Dan Murphy and Pete from ESPN. Top of the story, new Michigan head coach Sherrone Moore, one of 7 members from the 2023 football program accused of violating NCAA rules in a draft of the NCAA's Notice of Allegations obtained by ESPN. The draft, which could be subject to change, states Moore could face a show cause penalty and possibly a suspension for allegedly deleting a thread of 52 text messages with former Michigan staffer Connor Stalions in October 2023, on the same day that media reports revealed Stalions was leading an effort to capture the play calling signals of future opponents. The draft states that the texts were later recovered via, quote, device imaging, unquote, and Moore, quote, subsequently produced them to enforcement staff, close quote. Moore is accused of committing a level 2 violation according to the draft. And, level 2, that is not the most serious. That's level 1. And there are plenty of folks facing potential level 1 allegations. But, Tony, I think when your first inclination when you hear a story is, I've got to delete 52 text messages with this guy. I think I got muted there. When your first inclination is to delete a text thread with someone, that doesn't scream to me lone wolf that no one else knew what was happening. It's not conclusive proof of anything, but that certainly is not what that's suggestive of to me.
I know when I've deleted texts and text threads, it's not because, gosh, I hope these. Then you can't hear me either. I think I'm all set here.
There we go.
Got me now? Better now? All right. Yeah. When I've deleted text threads in the past, it's not because I was hoping I would get caught with all of these great threads about how nice I am about stuff. It's like, if they're, not that I've done this a lot, but clearly this is the second paragraph of the story. So it's something that is one of the main things here. And the fact that, I think one of the important parts of this is that they did get the information off of the text from what the texts say. And I wonder if it was damning, would that also be part of the notice of allegations as well? So I think it's interesting that these texts were deleted, but don't seem to maybe be damning, but then why delete them, in the first place? So there's a lot of conflicting thought processes going on with some of this stuff. Like, yes, it's damning to delete those texts. But since the NCAA now has those texts and it's not part of necessarily this first draft, and maybe it will be, I think that is interesting.
Well, and the other thing that is kind of the $64,000 question here is we're doing this off of a report from ESPN about a draft of the Notice of Allegations. So we haven't seen the Notice of Allegations. Presumably they have, or have at least had it, summarized for them. But, the fact that it's not in there doesn't necessarily mean that it was damning or it wasn't damning. We don't know yet because they didn't talk about the fact that it was damning or it wasn't damning. It's just that was, there were 52 text messages deleted. Bringing it to a quick super chat here from Wayne Taylor. Tony, I hope you got a chance for the cold pizza. Do we get the full 10 hours of Tom's dissertation of this issue? You're going to get some bylaws if that's your thing. We will get to those in just a minute. Tony, did you get a chance for the cold pizza?
Yeah, I did have some cold pizza. And the question from the previous show, we were doing our practice recap, Kevin and I, and this dropped like towards the end. And one of the, I think a super chat came in and said, Kevin, would you rather eat Burger King or listen to Tom talk bylaws for 10 hours? And he went with bylaws when I made sure that at least one of those Burger King burgers had to be an Impossible Whopper.
Well, that's I guess I will take that. I'm going to count that as a win. Sure. Why not? So let's run through real quick some of the other pieces of this. Sherrone Moore took over, obviously, as Michigan's head coach in January. The report says that he could be considered a, quote, repeat violator, unquote, by the NCAA, because, of course, he was part of the investigation last year that was sort of short-handed as cheeseburgers, et cetera. But, he was negotiated. He, according to the story, negotiated resolution to claims that he contacted recruits during a COVID-19 recruiting dead period. So, I think that's one of the things here where when people are in a rush to tell you that, oh, this is nothing and this is not going to go anywhere, the fact that Michigan, had the cheeseburgers, et cetera thing, and that just got kind of settled in a 3-year probation, but now they're setting up to be a repeat violator. That feels like one of those things that the people who are trying to hand wave this are, no one's really looking at that, and the fact that could be something that changes what the scope of a potential punishment could be here.
Well, and there's the repeat violator thing. There's also something else, and I'm trying to scan through the article. It just mentioned from the NCAA this basically this culture that is, or this habit of lack of cooperation, and it's going to continue because nobody that Jim Harbaugh, Chris Partridge, Denard Robinson, they're talking, and Connor Stalions, the 4 people they're talking about in this draft having committed level 1 violations. None of those guys are talking, and maybe some will, but not everybody will. Jim Harbaugh is not going to. That level of lack of cooperation is just going to continue, and it's the lack of cooperation that is this. The stonewalling is not something that the NCAA appreciates, basically, and you can be punished for that. And repeat violator not being forthcoming. We saw, was it Kentucky just recently get handed down some things, vacation of wins and things like that, and they were helpful and forthcoming. This is the opposite of that. This is, okay, here's my text messages after I've deleted them, after you've gotten them through device imaging. Here, now you can have them. That's forthcoming by way of trying to hide a bunch of stuff and then being found out and like, here you go. So that's as forthcoming as Michigan is. That's what it takes so far for anybody to be forthcoming in this. And so when you've got the stonewalling, apparently, the allegations of people, coaches or a coach telling players don't say anything, like that the level of activity to make sure that the NCAA doesn't find out things, it's not good, and it's something that seems to be permeating throughout all of this.
Well, let's hit on this. Well, okay, super chat real quick from Ryan Dawes before we get into the next thing. We as Ohio State fans should only be sated if many wins are vacated, especially that damn national championship. But whatever happens, happens. Thanks, Tom and Tony. I'm not at the point where I feel like we have enough information to make real specific prognostications on what the NCAA is going to do if these violations are all found to be. We're going to get into the, what is the lack of institutional control, because I feel like that might be part of this conversation down the line. Don't worry, I have slides for that. We'll get to read bylaws together. I'm not sure you're all excited about that. To me, it feels like everyone wants to rush to what's the punishment going to be, and this still feels like we're not there yet. I feel like we have potentially more information as this all sort of starts to come out, but I'm not at the point where I'm willing to say, yes, they're going to do that. No, they're going to do that. I mean, do you feel like you have a good sense for where this is headed, or not yet?
No, not yet. I think if this was 12 years ago, then you could, or maybe 12, 13 years ago, yeah, there would be some vacating of wins and whatever else comes with that. The NCAA used to be, it was more predictable back then, and now there's, who knows which way the wind is blowing each day and how much power the NCAA feels they have on a particular week or in a particular case, because they used to have essentially all of the power. Now they seem to have very little of the power, and so they have to pick and choose their battles. Now, I will say, every time Michigan has, or people from Michigan or spokespeople from Michigan are saying that Michigan will fight this, every time that has been said, Michigan has backed down, whether it's the temporary restraining order or there's something else previously last year where Michigan is like, oh yeah, no, we acquiesce. So I hear people saying Michigan would fight whatever punishment. They might say that, but they have not yet done anything that would prove to me that they're willing to go into a legal battle, because every time a legal battle is put in front of them, they have backed down.
Yeah, I think that's certainly something that is, it's very easy to say you're going to do this and you're going to do that, or that it's going to be this, or it's going to be that, or this is going to be a huge deal, or it's going to be not a deal. And it's very easy to say that. And, when whatever happens later, not very many people are going to get freezing cold takes over this one direction or another. So, this in general, we have generally with this tried to be, not on the absolute cutting edge of hot takeism on this, and sort of letting the process play out. And, what is the Big Ten's investigation going to find last fall? What is the NCAA's investigation going to find? And, you can sort of read into certain things. And I want to get to the next thing, which was the paragraph that really jumped out to me out of this whole story. Former Michigan staff members Jim Harbaugh, Chris Partridge, Denard Robinson, and Connor Stalions are also accused of committing level 1 violations, the most serious category in the NCAA's enforcement process. The school also faces a level 1 violation charge, according to the draft, due to its, quote, pattern of noncompliance within the football program, close quote, and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. Former coaches Jesse Minter and Steve Clinkscale are also accused of recruiting violations unrelated to Stalions in the draft. Two things jump out to me here, Tony. Number one, all of the guys who are accused of level 1 violations, and as well as Minter and Clinkscale, all of them left. Now, Denard Robinson left because he got popped for DUI. Everyone else left to go leave to the NCAA, and Stalions resigned last fall. I think that there was sort of the sense that, yeah, they were going to try and beat the posse out of town. This, to me, is sort of suggestive of, yes, they sort of knew they had to beat the posse out of town. And so, yeah, everyone just independently decided to leave for the NFL beyond the NCAA's jurisdiction, all at the exact same time. What a coincidence.
It is a coincidence, Tom, and I don't appreciate this witch hunt that seemingly found actually a bunch of witches. Sometimes that happens. The pattern of noncompliance is what I was trying to say earlier when I was talking about the culture of noncompliance. The other words are institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. in the past that would be called lack of institutional control, but this is this is an institutional control that is not lacking. It is has purpose, and the purpose of the control is to keep the NCAA out of their business. Basically, like this seems more controlled than out of controlled, based on the scope of this. And one of the things that I know Michigan fans have latched onto is that nowhere has Jim Harbaugh been accused of anything. And as we say, the head coach doesn't need to know. It's a measure of, should they have known? But also, even if the head coach doesn't know, if other people know, and it sure seems like this is not the rogue lone gunman that Michigan has tried to put out there, or their spokespeople or people in the media have tried to put out there, that it's just, a rogue staffer. I also think it's interesting that part of that story is talking about how, the interns knew about it, but they didn't know it was wrong. And if they don't know it's wrong, then they're probably talking about it openly, because if you know it's wrong, you're like, maybe on the down low, why hide something if it's completely legal? And so maybe there's more mention of it around the program than a rogue staffer would like to have had. But we can move on to the next slide, because I'm sure we've got plenty there. But the pattern and patterns, and this is being a repeat violator, and the program itself being a level 1 violator is it's not just an individual. It now becomes the football department, the university itself.
Yeah, that was the line, I think, that is everyone wants to point to this or that. And, the big sexy headline is that Sherrone Moore deleted a bunch of text messages. Mm-hmm. That line about the program having a level 1 violation after already being on a 3-year NCAA probation for level 1 violations, that's the one, that's the potentially, the big one that could go off. It has to all be proven, and Michigan has a chance. Even once this notice of allegations is actually finalized and goes out, Michigan has time to respond to that. I think 90 days to respond to that. So, this is not the final, and there's not talk of penalties yet, but that's, I think, the one that is something that you really got to keep your eye on. All right. How we love to go through all of our real pedantic stuff and read some rules and all that kind of stuff. I threw in the chat the NCAA Enforcement Division I internal operating procedures. They link to the PDF if you want to play along with the home version of our game. Here is one sentence here that I thought was pretty significant from that document. Failure to cooperate, lack of institutional control, and failure to monitor are among the most serious allegations. According to the following are the general guidelines the enforcement staff will consider when determining whether to bring the identified allegation. So that the point of this is just the institutional stuff. I think there's been a lot of, Jim Harbaugh's got violations, and boy, he's going to get a show cause and whatever, but it doesn't matter because he's off to the NFL. The institutional piece of this is what you got to keep your eye on, because right there it says failure to cooperate, lack of institutional control, and failure to monitor, which are kind of 3 different levels of the same basic thing, are among the most serious allegations. So that's just one thing to read. Now, I think we got to define lack of institutional control here. And this is small because there are a lot of words, but this is all from hang on, let me find the document. The NCAA Enforcement Division I internal operating procedures. I will throw a link to that in the chat as well, so you can go ahead and play it along with the home game. This is the stuff where this is the stuff that I think is going to be what sort of defines this, and what the NCAA finds, and what they feel is, what they can prove, and all that kind of stuff. This is what is going to be what maybe is the big, decision maker here. The Sherrone Moore thing, if he gets suspended, if he gets a show cause, obviously that impacts Sherrone Moore. That doesn't necessarily impact the Michigan program. This is what feels like this is going to be, whatever the punishment for this is, if it is found to be a violation, this is where, you're going to have, how big is this punishment for Michigan? Lack of institutional control. The enforcement staff does not assume that an institution violated the NCAA principle of institutional control when one or more level 1 or 2 violations may have occurred. Instead, consistent with guidelines for the membership, the enforcement staff takes a common sense approach in considering the nature and scope of the violation or violations in a case, together with the institution's specific efforts to create and maintain a positive culture of compliance. Let's put a pin in that and reflect back on deleting text messages, Jim Harbaugh not taking part in the NCAA investigation, as well as some other folks. That feels like that might be relevant information. Where the information did not have a structure in place to create a culture of compliance, or where there was a breakdown in that structure, a lack of institutional control allegation may be appropriate. Factors indicating institutional control include, but are not limited to, those outlined below. So let's just run through what the factors in a lack of institutional control finding are. A, promotion of a culture of compliance. B, oversight. C, policies and procedures. D, education and training. E, due diligence in delegating authority. F, program monitoring and review. G, enforcement, response, and prevention of recurrence. H, risk assessment and modification. So, none of that there is directly, clearly 100%, no doubt, airtight case. But when you look at, how the NCAA is presenting Michigan's cooperation with this, or lack of cooperation with the investigation, deleting text messages, there was a thing about Connor Stalions removing a hard drive from the facility. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff there. Jim Harbaugh not participating in the last investigation or in this investigation fully, not cooperating was sort of how they framed it. That there just feels like a lot of stuff, even before you get to they're already on probation for a different level 1 violation as this stuff is happening. All of that feels like it is sort of pointing to I don't know how big of a something it's going to be. It just feels like this is probably going to be some kind of a something.
Well, yeah, you're already on probation. You're being specifically investigated for the Stalions thing. And then they find other violations, minor that they are, paying $100 for a charity, which, is what it is. Getting somebody verified on Instagram, like just little things like that, that when something big like this happens, it's never a surprise when they find more. But then that goes to the culture of compliance that is part of the institutional control. And when you don't have that culture of compliance, or you don't have a structure in place, in fact, there's apparently a structure in place that is the opposite of that. It's kind of like the upside down of the NCAA's culture of compliance. Either way you squint from one side or the other, yes, this is a complete violation. This is a complete violation. This is a complete violation. Or you can also say, well, it's not, it's still just one guy, or it's still just 2 guys. At some point, it's just 4 guys. And yet there are 4, 5, 6, 4 guys, at least with the level 1 violation. So the idea that it's just a rogue person should end. There are more violations being found. And I saw a Michigan reporter tweet out that the NCAA's Notice of Allegations isn't even about what Stalions did. It's more about the lack of being forthcoming is where all of these potential violations could come from. And while I don't necessarily agree with that, there is always the thing with the NCAA is it's the cover up that is much more, and not just with the NCAA, but the cover up being much more devastating than the initial violation, which is the case. Michigan. That's why Michigan is already on probation. It was the cover up, the lack of being forthcoming that got them into trouble, and which is going to make them a repeat violator, which is going to continue to put out this habit of non-compliance. And so I would like to, and we'll eventually see maybe, I don't even know if the NCAA would tell us in their decision, like why wasn't it lack of institutional control, or why wasn't it failure to monitor? Because it seems like some of these things would are probably pretty malleable depending on the mood, the tenor of the way things are going with the NCAA.
Yeah, and that I think I don't feel like the mood of the NCAA is going to be helped by the Michigan response to any of this. I mean, all of the tweeting bet and all that stuff last fall, starting with that, and then getting into, Jim Harbaugh, the head coach, who's responsible for all the stuff in his program, according to the NCAA rules, not cooperating with the last investigation, not cooperating with this investigation. None of that feels like that's, the current head coach now apparently having deleted 52 text messages like immediately. This is not just an NCAA thing. What was the lesson from Watergate? It's not the crime, it's the cover up. That's what gets you. That feels like a lesson that may not have been learned in this case. Super chat from Jordan Kapler. What should Kevin's punishment be for all of this? I mean, he's not on this show, so he's missing out on getting to talk about, to be actually on here to listen to me read bylaws. I don't know, Tony, that feels like the YouTube version of the NCAA death penalty. I don't know what else could be more severe than that.
I feel like I'm being punished by having to listen to all of these bylaws, Tom. No offense.
Oh, none taken, none whatsoever taken. Here's a question from Jake B. And this sort of addresses something that you brought up. Yeah. Jake B with a Michigan icon as his avatar. So that gives me a sense from the direction he's coming from. Why is no one talking about how the NOA draft apparently didn't really address the infractions in question? I'm going to, first of all, refer you back to the conversation we had earlier about the fact that this is just the report about the NOA. This is not the actual NOA in the draft. And so there's probably a lot of stuff in there that they didn't talk about. But I'm going to read this paragraph from the report for you. Stalions resigned in early November following a week of public reports detailing his scheme of purchasing tickets to games around the country and directing a network of individuals to video the sidelines in an effort to decode their play calling signals. Ready? The NCAA's draft, obtained by ESPN, states that investigators used ticket information, film, photographs, and interviews to determine that Stalions had impermissibly scouted at least 13 future Michigan opponents on at least 58 occasions between 2021 and 2023. He directed others to scout some opponents multiple times, including one team that they scouted 7 different times in 2022, according to the draft. Tony, does that address the infractions in question? It feels like that addresses the infractions in question. Am I crazy?
Well, and I'll go back to a sentence we've talked about. The school also faces a level 1 violation charge according to the draft due to its pattern of non-compliance within the football program. The complying is not cheating. Cheating is non-compliance, and having so like there are a lot of things that you can do that is non-compliant, and pretty much any violation is going to be non-compliant. That's why it's a violation. So I think when you have that kind of language, non-compliance could be a bunch of things. And as there's already all of this detail put forth on the Stalions, and as you said, the tickets and all of that, all of this to me is non-compliance because you're not complying with the rules. You are breaking the rules. So I think that is one of the things that maybe explains that away.
Yeah, I think there have been people who have come to this with, we know what this is going to be. And this, if you just look at this piece, and this is human nature. How many times during the Jim Tressel Tatgate thing did we hear people talk about, in the SI report about rigging a camp raffle for and that was a thing that he was accused of doing in 1984. And everyone kind of went, it's, rigging raffle. Really, this is and it was like, there was other stuff that happened. And, that was, the Michigan had their own version of this with the last scandal where it was, he just bought some kids some cheeseburgers. Should he go for jail for that? It was like, well, there was also the COVID visit violations, which was the actual serious piece of it. But, everyone sort of by human nature comes at it with the idea that, well, this is my tribe and therefore my tribe is right. And therefore you're being ridiculous if you accuse them of this. And, so you can, if you want to read the report and just say, well, there's nothing about the violations, except for the spot where there was the paragraph about the violations. There's nothing about the violations, except for the sentence that I will read this again. This is buried in the middle of the report. This is the sentence right here. The school also faces a level 1 violation charge according to the draft due to its, quote, pattern of non-compliance within the football program, close quote, and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. We read one more time, quote, pattern of noncompliance within the football program, close quote, and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. The NCAA considers Michigan not cooperating, but being adversarial to the investigation. The head coach, the former head coach, has not been cooperative. The current head coach deleted 52 text messages with Connor Stalions on the day this all came out. Yeah, they went back and found him later, but that was the initial thing. Sherrone Moore only facing level 2 allegations, not level 1, so those are not as serious, but according to the story, could still face a suspension, could face a show cause. I mean, this is significant stuff. So yeah, I think that's all sort of worth having those kind of conversations. I'm just kind of scrolling through my notes here. I do want to read this one. The NCAA's draft said Stalions failed to cooperate with its investigation. Yeah, that's not a real surprise. That's, and what is the NCAA going to do to him? They're going to give him a show cause, and it's not going to matter because he's not going to work in college sports anymore. So it doesn't matter. The draft states that in October 2023, he removed hard drives from the Michigan football offices and also gave a football player a sheet containing play calling signals of a future opponent. It said Stalions asked the player to bring the sheet to a team intern's house until he could retrieve it later. Stalions also refused to let the school review his phone, according to the draft. So, and then this is Chris Partridge, former defensive assistant who was fired by Michigan last November, accused of pressuring a player to lie or mislead NCAA investigators in an effort to, quote, protect, unquote, the coaching staff during the probe into Stalions' scheme, according to the draft. If you have to get people to lie to protect the coaching staff, I think there's a little bit of this, which is, how stupid do you think everyone is? That, this is, you brought it up earlier, this is, everyone thinks this is legal, but also it's a secret. Don't tell anyone. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And, the coaching staff, which knows everything about everything, and everyone knows that that's kind of, the NCAA is basically set up to assume the head coach knows everything about everything. This is just low level, easily replaceable staffers. They were the only ones who knew. But they have to lie to protect the coaching staff. There's a lot of pieces here that don't really fit.
Well, and I can also go to the last play sheet that Connor Stalions handed off to an intern for a future opponent. I'll give you 15 guesses on who that future opponent may have been. Oh, and now this is a different game.
This picture was from the 2022 game. Yes, this is a picture I had of the Marvin Harrison sideline catch. It might have been ruled out of bounds on the first drive of the game, but you see Connor Stalions back there. Mm-hmm. He is the one closest to the sideline, looking down the sideline. Jesse Minter right next to him. And then right behind the line judge's back, there is a play sheet, which we have been told is, signals that correspond with Ohio State signals. So they had, that we have been told, I can't independently verify this, but we have been told that those were Ohio State signals from that game. That was the first drive of the 2022 game. So not the 2023 game, not the one we're talking about here, but, up there for illustration purposes only. Okay, go ahead, Tony.
Well, and this is like the dying act, basically, of Connor Stalions, is to hand this play sheet over. And it's like, Lady Elena telling Jamie Lannister, tell Cersei it was me. This is like, tell Ryan it was me, handing that off and making sure that it got to the hands that it needed to be. And it's interesting that one of the narratives that has come out is, well, they stopped cheating after the right before the Michigan State game. Once they got caught, the cheating stopped. And it's like, well, maybe not. Maybe not, because one of the items used to cheat, if you will, was passed along. And also, the hard drives is an interesting thing as well. And maybe those were just personal, had a bunch of music on them. You don't want to leave your music collection behind. You don't, you've got like all of the Sublime albums and things like that. And a lot of those are bootlegs, so you can't get those replaced. You don't want to leave without those. So that is all very interesting as well. And of course, those are, I'm not a hacker. I'm not a, CSI computer person, but I assume all of that stuff is gone and it will never show back up. But Tom, maybe for somebody who has written a manifesto, and I'm not referring to you, but to Connor, having written a Michigan manifesto, I wonder if all of this stuff is still around, or do you get rid of it so that it can never come back to you or be tied to you, even though it went missing with you, allegedly.
Allegedly. I'm just scrolling through the comments, and boy, folks have some thoughts. Folks going at it in the comments, which this is not really super. This is cats and dogs, as Ohio State and Michigan fans typically are, and something this heated, unsurprisingly. But yes, while you're in those comments going at each other, please do hit the thumbs up on YouTube. That helps us, helps other folks find our shows. Make sure you are also subscribed to our channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, because we're doing a lot of live shows right now, more even than we planned, as it turns out. We've had live shows from Ohio State practice each of the last 4 days. I don't want to get everyone too excited. Hotel check-in day coming up. We'll have a live show from Hotel check-in day. There's all of the great Ohio State fall camp traditions. We'll be there for all of those. And yes, talking Ohio State football, previewing the season, all that kind of stuff as well. But today we got to talk a little bit more about Michigan. And there was a question. Here we go from Lynn Spreezy. Did they even investigate the LLC? I haven't heard anything more about it. That was about the LLC that Connor Stalions had, that Blake Corum's name was on, and it was formed in Wyoming or whatever it was. That was one of those really weird, of the many, many weird sideline stories of this whole thing that was up there. And the answer to that is we don't know. That is something that could theoretically have been looked into by the NCAA. There was nothing in the ESPN report about it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't investigated. That doesn't mean it's not in the Notice of Allegations. All we have right now is ESPN's summary of a draft Notice of Allegations. So this is not the final copy by any means, or the final report. Although, Tony, I get the sense, if there was really something there that they found real concrete proof of that would have impacted Corum's eligibility or any of that kind of stuff, that feels like something that probably would have been mentioned in this reporting.
I think so. And that was enough of a known thing, not like an allegation, or just, it was out there. So it would be like something that the NCAA would want to look at. You would assume just, hey, let's just clear this up. But it is interesting that it's kind of just gone away, and maybe for a good reason. Maybe there's nothing there, but it was odd that those things were tied together. And Blake Corum did come out and say, I'm not involved with that. I don't know how my name got involved with that or whatever. So there are still questions that have to be answered from that. Maybe we'll get to hear those answers in Connor Stalions' Netflix documentary at the end of the month, which I'm sure will clear all of this up. We'll finally have all of our questions answered, figuring out why this, why that, and Connor will be like, well, this is why, and this will all make much sense. And it wasn't that Blake Corum; it was a different Blake Corum. You don't know him; he lives in Alaska.
My girlfriend lives in Canada. You wouldn't know her. She's also part of my LLC for some reason. Yeah, so that's the Connor Stalions sort of, in a nutshell, the update here. I do want to circle back. We've picked up a ton of viewers, so I want to circle back kind of to the top of the show and just kind of go back through, because we've picked up a lot of folks since we started. Let's start with the top of the ESPN report. New Michigan head coach Sherrone Moore, one of 7 members from the 2023 football program, accused of violating NCAA rules in a draft of the NCAA's Notice of Allegations obtained by ESPN, the draft which could be subject to change, and that is worth noting here. This is not a final deal. States Moore could face a show cause penalty and possibly a suspension for allegedly deleting a thread of 52 text messages with former Michigan staffer Connor Stalions in October 2023, on the same day that media reports revealed Stalions was leading an effort to capture the play calling signals of future opponents. Boy, I remember where I was when that happened. That was a momentous day in Ohio State, Michigan, everyone else football history, it felt like. The draft states that the texts were later recovered via, quote, device imaging, and Moore, quote, subsequently produced them to enforcement staff, close quote. Moore is accused of committing a level 2 violation according to the draft. So this is the top of the story. This is the lead of the story, as they say in journalism. This is somewhat consequential in that, you don't really see head coaches get a show cause and survive generally. I'm sure this is something that Michigan folks are going to say, if they do, they'll fight it and they're going to get it. I mean, do you want to give people the 15-second version of what a show cause is and what it kind of really means in a circumstance like this.
Right. It's not going to get you fired unless you are already like kind of on the outs. Basically, it just means a show cause means the school would have to show a cause, show reason to employ you. And there's also additional monitoring going on with that. And so when a coach has a show cause, usually they're unemployed by that point. And so no school is necessarily going to bring them on because they don't want to deal with that. Plus, if you bring them on, then you automatically become, you endanger yourself from being like a repeat violator because you have somebody on staff like that. So there's a lot of reasons where it's just, we don't need that kind of noise for 3 years and let somebody else deal with it. But if he's already there at Michigan, like I don't expect this to get him fired unless Michigan is 6-6 this year, something like that, where it's like, let's move on. Let's use this as a cause to move on. We've seen other schools do that where, this is kind of a scandal. Let's go ahead and get rid of somebody, and somebody we just gave, $90 million to. Let's just go ahead and let's use this to fire him. And we've I think Tennessee has done that. Michigan State has done that, where it's like, that's just cut bait, that sort of thing. I think it is interesting to me that deleting a thread of 52 texts and not being forthcoming is only a level 2 violation, and level 1 being the higher. So I think that's interesting that that's not so much of a big deal, but like that's a lot of texts. And so 52 is bigger than 2, level 2. So immediately that gets everybody's attention. But I think the number that we're glossing over is in the first sentence of this entire story. And it's Sherrone Moore is one of 7 members of the 2023 football program accused of violating NCAA rules. That in itself is a huge thing that should get people's attention from the Michigan side. And I know we are so, divided and divisive in terms of our side versus your side, that side, that some people on the Michigan side aren't even going to, so what, 7, who cares? Doing what? For what? Why? I don't care. But that's a lot. It used to be a very big thing when something like this would come down.
Well, and you look at how many, what percentage of their 10 countable coaches, there were a lot of folks involved in that. And in among those 10 highest profile coaches, they're mentioning both coordinators, head coach, a bunch of assistants. Here's another paragraph that we thought was rather notable. Former Michigan staff members Jim Harbaugh, Chris Partridge, Jannard Robinson, and Connor Stalions are also accused of committing level 1 violations, the most serious category in the NCAA's enforcement process. The school also faces a level 1 violation charge, according to its draft, due to its, quote, pattern of noncompliance within the football program, close quote, and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. Former coaches Jesse Minter and Steve Clinkscale are also accused of recruiting violations unrelated to Stalions in the draft. That's one of the things that, that last sentence is, once the NCAA starts looking around, they're going to find some stuff that's going to impact a lot of folks. But if you've got Sherrone Moore, the former offensive coordinator and current head coach, deleting text messages from Stalions as soon as this first happens, and you've got the former head coach Jim Harbaugh, and you've got Chris Partridge, who's a position coach, all of these folks are being accused of the most serious category of NCAA enforcement issue of violations. But again, the sentence in this whole thing that jumps out to me is the one in the middle of this paragraph. The school also faces a level 1 violation charge, according to the draft, due to its, quote, pattern of noncompliance within the football program, close quote, and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. That's, that is big enough that right there, that, if you are familiar with NCAA compliance, if you cooperate with an investigation, that generally helps you. If the NCAA is calling you out for not helping, and in fact, institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation, and then you add on top of that they just had a separate major violations case, involving the, cheeseburgers, et cetera thing involving actually COVID visitation violations and that kind of stuff, where they also didn't cooperate, where they landed on 3 years probation, then you're setting up, much like at the top, we talked about Sherrone Moore potentially being a repeat offender and that making the penalty more serious. The university is setting up to potentially be a repeat offender here. That, there's been a lot of talk about, it says this, it doesn't say this. That sentence right there about the pattern of noncompliance within the football program and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation, that's the one that should be like big, bold 72-point font right at the top of the article. It's kind of buried in there, but to me, that feels like that's my thing that I'm looking at and going, watch this space. That feels like where the news might be coming from at some point.
Yeah, they can't punish Jim Harbaugh because he's gone. It's not gone, the program itself, and that is being pointed to as a violator. You mentioned the assistant coaches. Like, how many assistant coaches with NCAA violations or alleged NCAA violations does it take for failure to monitor, lack of institutional control to kick in? Because we're talking 40% of the 10 countables, 4 of the 10, and the head coach. So this is nearly half of your on the road coaching staff has been named in this draft, and that's a lot, and that is a culture of noncompliance, basically. And when we say noncompliance is not they're not talking to the NCAA. That is one aspect. Noncompliance is not complying with the rules, and that is the whole Connor Stalions or some of these recruiting things that we're talking about. Why aren't they talking about Connor Stalions? That's the noncompliance aspect of it.
All right, got a super chat from Fox Body Blues. I wonder which opponent Michigan advanced scouted 7 times before playing them. Tony, you got to think it's someone towards the end of the schedule. Any guesses on who that might be?
Well, probably a pretty good chance that it's the same one with the play sheet that got handed out as the feds were coming in, and feds in quotes. Yeah, like these are answers we don't know, but it sure seems pretty easy to make an assumption. And I don't know that anybody's going to, because it's either Ohio State or Penn State in all seriousness, in terms of the 2 biggest opponents on the schedule last year, because Michigan's non-conference, there's nothing there to worry about. So, and you could say the same thing about that final play sheet. It's Penn State or it's Ohio State. And do you really think the Penn State is going to be the bigger worry there? Like, Ohio State is the reason for all of this, really, to get over on Ohio State, to reach that level. The frustration of 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, avoiding it in 2020, all of that frustration bubbling over, creating something, whether this is perhaps it was begun by a rogue loner, but it became more of that because he recruited people to help him out. And clearly that is that's a lot of the case here, is that he wasn't the only one who knew about it. So maybe Tom, maybe it was begun by a rogue staffer, but then it was continued on by a rogue staff.
Well,
or not rogue.
Well, how did Watergate begin? It begun with a bunch of people who, did Richard Nixon know that was happening at the time? Probably not when they broke into the Watergate. But what got you? It's the cover up. It's not the crime. If it had just been guys broke into the Democratic National Committee offices at the Watergate Hotel, that does not get the president to resign. That is not, there's a bunch of stuff that happens after that. That is where the actual issue is. This is an important point, and we've talked about this a few times, but Stack Jr. says they have 90 days to respond, and the NCAA and Notice of Allegations hasn't even dropped yet. This is a draft, supposedly. All of that is true. This is an ESPN report about a draft of the Notice of Allegations. This is not the official Notice of Allegations. We've talked about that a few times. We just want to make sure we reiterate that. And, this is the ESPN.com summary of the draft of the Notice of Allegations. This is a lot more information than we had, because I think there was a lot of, what is the NCAA going to be able to prove? And this certainly gives you a bunch of different stuff that they feel like they can probably prove. So this is, this is good information. This is not the official document. This is not even a report about the official document. That is still to come. But this is certainly worthwhile information. There are a few comments, or some Michigan folks in the comments that I think bringing up some things that I think are worth
Can I just say
addressing.
real quick?
Sure,
It's going to be fascinating if that 90-day response window, those 90 days will coincide with like the game week, or like leading right up to it when Michigan finally responds to that, is like leading up, like their 90 days is like 8 days before Ohio State and Michigan play.
Yeah, this is also at the top show. There are 117 days until the Michigan game as of Monday. So if this does come out, the 90-day response is going to be right in that window. If the official NOA comes out, that 90-day response window is going to be sometime in November, when there is already a lot of thought and conversation around the Ohio State-Michigan game and rivalry. That is all. This will only make it more so. 2 years in a row of potentially a whole separate conversation about the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry and what it could all mean. Here's a couple things, and this is just kind of, I'm picking one guy out of here just to sort of, because it's been sort of representative of some of the comments that I think we do want to address. Dred Roberts says, buying tickets is not a violation, smart guy. Now, that's the, Connor Stalions. This is the ESPN report. That the NCAA's draft obtained by ESPN states that investigators used ticket information, film, photographs, and interviews to determine that Stalions had impermissibly scouted at least 13 future Michigan opponents on at least 58 occasions between 2021 and 2023. He directed others to scout some opponents multiple times, including one team that they scouted 7 different times from 2022, according to the draft. So, yes, no one is saying that buying tickets is a violation. It's right in there. Stalions had impermissibly scouted at least 13 future Michigan opponents on at least 58 occasions between 2021 and 2023. So, buying tickets is not a violation. Impermissibly scouting in person, it's right in there. Impermissibly, that's what that means. Against the rules, impermissibly scouting, that's the violation. Deleting text, another follow-up. Deleting text is not a violation. I mean, it's again, it is a. Moore could face a show cause penalty and possibly a suspension for allegedly deleting a thread of 52 text messages with former Michigan staffer Connor Stalions in October 2023. Okay. The draft, I'm going to read it again. The draft, which could be subject to change, states Moore could face a show cause penalty and possibly a suspension for allegedly deleting a thread of 52 text messages with former Michigan staffer Connor Stalions in October 2023, on the same day that media reports revealed Stalions was leading an effort to capture the play calling signals of future opponents. Okay, right there. There's a cause and effect there. Moore could face a show cause penalty and possibly suspension for allegedly deleting a thread of 52 text messages. Right there. Self-evidently, that is a violation. And then the last one, I didn't see Stalions with a camera on the CMU sidelines. Now that's a whole separate conversation here, where first of all, at the time this all came out last fall, he had sunglasses that had a camera in them. Like, that people identify based on the photo that there was a specific model of sunglasses with a camera in them. So, that's all been stuff that's been addressed long ago. The Central Michigan thing is so interesting because they addressed that he's there. Central Michigan fired a staffer who had previously worked at Michigan who, it's impossible to say, Tony, how did he get on the sidelines? How did they even know who he was? How could any of that possibly have happened? And it's like, well, it feels like we kind of already have the answer to that question, don't we?
Yeah, and the fact that this Central Michigan coach was fired like a week ago, as you're preparing for the season, like, you don't fire people right now unless there's a very, very good reason. And that was, they got rid of their quarterbacks coach. It's not a graduate assistant to the graduate assistant. This is a quarterbacks coach that is very, very involved. You're like, you know what, you got to go. And, that's the coach that was attached to, was a student assistant at Michigan under Harbaugh. You can do that math. I'm not going to do it for you, but it's the Central Michigan thing. And you don't need to be recording anything. Advanced scouting in person or being in the same game at the same stadium as a future opponent is not allowed. We've seen other coaches get dinged for that accidentally. Like, I'm not supposed to be here. So this is the level of, really trying to grasp onto some of these things, like buying tickets, is not. That's the kind of an intellectual dishonesty that you can't reason with. And, we can try like talking about it. I have no problem with, we should talk about it because maybe it helps somebody else, but it's not going to help those people. Not going to help somebody like that is latching onto that and has to latch onto it because that's really all they have.
Yeah, super chat from Jim Smith. I'm just glad that after 10 months, they finally figured out Connor Stalions was at the Central Michigan game. Impressive how far Michigan fans can bury their heads in the sand. I don't think there's been a whole lot of question that it was him. Going back to, when did that come out? That was like last November, right? It was kind of right as all this stuff was sort of happening. Yeah. Someone found a video of the Central Michigan State game and kind of went, "Hey, that guy with the funny nose and glasses and fake mustache on sure looks a lot like Connor Stalions." And I think that was broadly assumed to be him, and Central Michigan essentially, by not saying it wasn't him, they more or less told you it was him immediately. Like, it was just, there were not that many people on the sidelines. It was very, it was very obvious, this is not an Ohio State game. This is Central Michigan probably had, 30 people with passes on the sidelines. Like, it's not that hard to go through and go, oh no, that's actually Steve, and he, he's one of our trainers. Like, but once that didn't happen, it was kind of like, okay, so unless you're invested in the idea that it wasn't him, it was pretty obvious it was him.
Well, and Jim McElwain, the coach there, was the week after, said, I don't know where that sign stealing guy came from, or I don't know anything about that sign stealing guy, that sort of thing. And if this is a guy like, yeah, that's Jeff from video, like, that's very easy to no, that's Connor from video. Actually, it's very easy to tell who it is. Now, I have been fascinated by the lack of anything coming out of that. Like the lack of reporting or investigation that hasn't been there has been surprising. I know Central Michigan is stonewalling at this point, and we can't talk about any ongoing NCAA violations or anything like that, investigations. But like that's just another example of the level that certainly Connor Stalions allegedly went to. And it just seems silly to think that it was just him. And now you no longer have to, not you, Tom, nobody else has to think that any longer that it was just him based on, well, common sense, but also this draft.
And, this is the last one, I promise. We're not going to humor this any longer, but, absolute insistence that no one even knows if that was Connor Stalions or not. They have not, they have not confirmed that video was him.
Well, even if somebody did confirm it,
actually, they don't know for sure he was on the sideline. Okay, ready. So link. The request was link an article that shows that it was him, that says it was him. Okay, from the ESPN article we've been reading from this whole show. The draft also states the NCAA gathered evidence that shows Stalions was on the sideline at Michigan State's season opening game against Central Michigan in 2023. Stalions was wearing a bench pass, Central Michigan coaching gear, and a disguise, according to the draft, which states that Stalions' conduct, quote, seriously undermined or threatened the integrity of the NCAA collegiate model, close quote. The draft does not say how Stalions obtained a bench pass for the Chippewas sideline. Okay, so have we, now that we've addressed that, can we move on, please?
Tom, do you expect me to believe ESPN?
Right. Yes, that's yeah.
Who is quoting the draft? Do you expect me to believe the NCAA? Come on, Tom.
And as far as the idea of he didn't have a camera, Kevin Noon, buckeyehuddle.com, in the comments, Kevin has a link there to the smart glasses, the Wayfarer matte black graphite polar gradient glasses that are smart glasses, essentially like knockoff Google Glass or whatever, where you are the glasses with a little hidden camera in them, basically like Homer with the oversized novelty foam cowboy hat with the camera in it. Yeah, so that's, yes, they know he was there. They know what he was using. Like this is this is no longer something that is really in dispute on anything other than the most fetid fever swamps of the college football internet. We talked a little bit about the potential penalties and all that kind of stuff, and the fact that it's too soon to make a real judgment or make an informed speculation on what exactly kind of penalties they could be looking at in terms of this case. Ryan Daysbeard says if Michigan was smart, they would come out and take their penalties this year. This is the year they're supposedly going to have a down year. If you fight and then you have a good team next year, yikes. The argument for that is, you look at, you throw someone, you sort of throw the guy on the, you make your sacrifice. You make your sacrifice and you say, okay, well, we're going to, we think we're going to get a bowl ban. And I'm not saying they're going to get a bowl ban, but, I think we're going to get a bowl ban. So therefore you take, who was it? Was it Arizona State? There was someone who, I think it was last year, 2 years ago when Kenny Dillingham got there. I think he basically walked into the first practice and went, ugh, and figured they were probably not going to be national championship contenders, and they took a self-imposed bowl ban. And then look, seriously, we're cooperating, we're being compliant, that would all go very much against how Michigan has handled a lot of this stuff so far. Not that that's not an intelligent way to do it, and if it's not a great team, or if things aren't going great this year, could they take Sherrone Moore and offer him up as a sacrifice? Hey, if you're going to have you're going to have a show cause, you're going to be suspended, and multiple, potential violations in multiple cases. Could they do that? Sure. If it's an NCAA thing, you can fire him for cause and not have to pay out the balance of the contract or the buyout or any of that kind of stuff. This is all very theoretical, and this is all several steps down the line. But certainly that is one way that they could choose to handle that if it gets to that point.
Well, and I said it previously, they should have fired Jim Harbaugh before he left. And once it was clear that they weren't going to get that contract extension, just be like, we're done. That way, he's leaving. Just, you can't quit. We're firing you. That sort of thing, that you can save face with the NCAA. But I've also said, and I just saw somebody else say it here, I think Todd Mann, if Michigan goes 3-3, I won't be shocked if they self-impose a bowl ban this year. Just, what? Playoffs aren't looking likely, and so let's just go ahead and get this done with. Imagine the 2020 hindsight for Gene Smith in 2011. Ohio State blew a national championship opportunity because they were ineligible for the postseason in 2012 when they were undefeated. Like, this is a thing that happens, and so if you have a team that the lesser of two teams, you should just go ahead and punish the lesser if we're talking about getting something accomplished and winning a national title, since that's all that's important anymore. But yeah, I think I don't expect, and I'm sure you don't either, you don't expect Sherrone Moore to be fired, but if things go by, that's something you can do. But I think we know that Michigan stands by their coaches because they don't like to admit they were wrong. Like Rich Rodriguez made it for 3 years, and 2 of those years were really, really bad. I don't foresee that happening any longer. And everybody that you talk to loves Sherrone Moore and really respects him around, the coaching industry. And I'm sure Michigan feels very, very good about it. But, this is a tough schedule. You open week 2 with Texas, week 5 with USC. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, if they go 3-2, maybe it's just best. Let's take, depending on the way the wind is blowing at that point, if they know they've been caught maize and blue-handed, if you will, then let's just go ahead and take care of this.
Real quick, Dave S says the nonstop ads make this difficult to watch. Sorry if I have no idea what the ad experience is for you right now. If it is annoying, I apologize. That is a YouTube thing, not an us thing. We are not inserting ads, so you can take that up with the good folks at Google LLC. If so, we apologize for that. I do want to go back to this. We talked about the lack of institutional control thing, and I want to hit that real quickly because this, again, feels like the most important sense here. There's been, people are arguing about all sorts of different stuff in the comments. The most important sentence of this whole article to me is buried way in the middle of this. And it says the school also faces a level 1 violation charge, according to the draft, due to its, quote, pattern of noncompliance within the football program, close quote, and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. That is, assuming that is an accurate summation of the draft notice of allegations, that is basically that is the equivalent of getting MF'd by the NCAA. Like they're going to be, it gets, cloaked in bureaucratic language, but that is, basically the NCAA saying about the worst thing they can say about you in a case like this, where a pattern of noncompliance within the football program is one thing. Institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation is a whole separate issue. Those are both things that are viewed as very, very serious by the NCAA. Folks, we love our bylaws, don't we? This is from the NCAA Enforcement Division I Internal Operating Procedures. This is the most recent version, effective February 27th, 2023. So you're going to hear lots of stuff about how, the NCAA has changed its punishments and how, it's not nearly as serious and they don't punish anyone anymore. This is from the most recent version. Finally, failure to cooperate, lack of failure to cooperate, really right there, first thing in that sentence. Lack of institutional control and failure to monitor are among the most serious allegations. Accordingly, the following are general guidelines the enforcement staff will continue when determining whether to bring the identified allegations. So let's go back one more time. We're going to read these back to back. Ready? The school faces a level 1 violation charge according to the draft due to its, quote, pattern of noncompliance within the football program and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. Failure to cooperate. Do I need to draw the dots there? Lack of institutional control and failure to monitor. Again, do I need to draw the dots there for you? Are among the most serious allegations laid out in the NCAA's Division I Internal Operating Procedures. Yes, Jim Harbaugh is in the NFL. Yes, Steve Clinksdale is in the NFL, and Denard Robinson's not on the staff anymore. They're talking about the program. Right there. They're talking about it in that NCAA article. Again, this is not this is not the official NOA. This is a draft, and this is the ESPN summation of the draft, assuming it's accurate. That was the sentence that matters. All right, Tony, deep breath. Lack of institutional control. This is from the NCAA's document. The enforcement staff does not assume that an institution violated the NCAA principle of institutional control when one or more level 1 or level 2 violations may have occurred. Instead, consistent with guidance from the membership, the enforcement staff takes a common sense approach in considering the nature and scope of the violation or violations in a case, together with the institution's specific efforts to create and maintain a positive culture of compliance. Where the institution did not have a structure in place to create a culture of compliance, or where there was a breakdown in that structure, a lack of institutional control allegation may be appropriate. Factors indicating institutional control include, but are not limiting to those outlined below. Generally, it is necessary to determine whether an institution's efforts to comply with all applicable rules and regulations of the association were A, in place at the time of the alleged violation or violations occurred, B, established to deter violations and not merely to discover their existence after they occurred, and C, adequately promoted, monitored, and enforced. The factors indicated below are promotion of a culture of compliance, oversight, policies and procedures, education and training, due diligence in delegation authority, program monitoring and review, enforcement, response, and prevention of recurrence, and risk assessment and modification. Tony, I'm going to read one more time that sentence from the ESPN article. The school also faces a level 1 violation charge according to the draft due to its, quote, pattern of noncompliance within the football program, close quote, and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. Tony, I'm just laying it all out there. Any thoughts, any dots you'd like to connect for anyone? I mean, again, we are not speculating on punishments. We're not speculating on any of that stuff. To me, that one sentence right there, that should be the headline. It's not, because there's the big splashy thing about Sherrone Moore and deleting text messages. That sentence feels to me like, boy, that's going to be, whenever this all comes out, that's going to be the sentence. And the follow-up from that sentence and the potential punishments that stem from that sentence, that's going to be what we're talking about ultimately when all is said and done here.
Yeah, and so often when there's an NCAA violation and the punishment is going to be handed down, you always hear, gosh, can't you have punished the people who did it? You're punishing the kids that are here now. You couldn't punish the people that were there last year when this occurred. And you're going to have the same people saying that. Jim Harbaugh's gone. All of these, Jesse Minor, all of these different coaches are gone. Connor Stalions is gone. So like there's nobody left to punish or whatever. There are still people there that have been involved with this, but what is still there is the university that has not cooperated until they've been forced to cooperate. And even being compelled to cooperate, there's still not much cooperation. They're just allowing the NCAA like inside the building basically at this point. And how many people has the NCAA has put out, I don't know, however many interview requests. What percentage of those interview requests do you think are being answered with an actual interview in this case? I bet it's a very small in terms of the key players in this. And then the failure to monitor thing. This is clearly a failure to monitor, because if you were monitoring it, then you'd be admitting guilt. So like feels like a catch-22 kind of thing, like for Michigan, because either you knew it was going on or you didn't, and neither of those instances, none of those scenarios are good for Michigan. And failure to monitor would be much better than monitoring the entire situation and knowing what was going on.
Yeah, that feels, all of this stuff feels like it's kind of pointing towards a certain direction that, I don't want to say, they're going to go X far and it's going to be, I'm willing to say with a great deal of certainty, Michigan is not going to get the death penalty. I will absolutely say that with no hesitance, no reservation. Beyond that, there's been lots of speculation about a 1 or 2 year bowl ban, and that, in the article again, Sherrone Moore could face some kind of a suspension or a something else in terms of an NCAA punishment. In terms of the scholarship reductions, I don't know. In terms of vacation of wins or championships, I don't know. There's a lot of that is going to depend on what they can really find, what they can really really tie to this directly. And this feels like one of those things where everyone has their opinion, and it's definitely going to be this, or it's definitely not going to be this. This is one of these things where you're well served to let the process play out a little more. Again, this is a draft, an ESPN report about a draft of the Notice of Allegations. This is not the Notice of Allegations. So this is additional information. It is from a credible source, Dan Murphy and Pete Thamel of ESPN. So this is not just, Joe Blow's blog.biz. But these are people who are, can reasonably be assumed to be connected to folks who would have access to this information. So, this is, all of this is suggestive of the direction this is headed. Where is this ultimately going to end up? We don't know. But, broadly speaking, Tony, is this, when you read that article, there have been lots of people saying, oh boy, this is terrible news for Michigan. Oh boy, this is great news for Michigan because of what it doesn't say. Like, is this good news for Michigan? Is this bad news for Michigan? Is this, hasn't really moved the needle for you? But, again, we're not speculating on specific punishments or any kind of stuff, but, is this good news or bad news for Michigan, broadly speaking?
I don't think it's good news for Michigan in that it's, and I mentioned this on the first live show we did today after practice. Once there is digging, there's more digging. And maybe the local media will start digging as well into this. And then, who knows what comes from that. But I'm still of the opinion, like, I don't know what to think of the NCAA in terms of where are they, in terms of what do they want to do to punish, because I think they have enough to levy a very substantial punishment. When we've seen Michigan is already on 3 years probation for basically stonewalling an investigation of a handful of level 2 violations, which are generally just washed away by most unless you lie about them, and then it becomes a level 1. This, you already have the level 1s, you have some level 2s, and the program itself, the university itself, is being levied an allegation. So none of this is good news, and you'll see some Michigan fans and people around there just rolling their eyes or laughing it off. And ultimately, that may be what happens from the NCAA in terms of, like, what is, it used to be vacating wins was the slap on the wrist that didn't count. And, that now it's like, that's the one thing you don't want to have happen if you're Michigan, because that's the national championship. So go ahead and put us on probation for another 3 years, 6 years of probation. Who cares? It used to be that used to mean something. I'm wondering with like how do you punish a program now in terms of like, say scholarship reduction, right? And this is just me wondering with NIL, like what would a more apt punishment at this point be? Like you only get to use half of your 20% that is supposed to go to players, like, but then you're punishing players again, like the money, like you're trying to punish them and you remove some scholarships, but what is a 5 scholarship reduction when it was 85 used to mean a lot more than it would now. So there are some adjustments that are going to have to be made in terms of punishment. So I don't know. I'm not at this point, unless there is, we'll see more, but I just don't know how, I'm not going to say vindictive. That's just how serious the NCAA is about punishing somebody for all of this, for the non-compliance and the lack of being forthcoming when trying to interview people and talk to people about this, because both of those things are very, very bad.
Yeah, those are both things that the NCAA views as very, very serious. And, again, as you said earlier, the last time it was level 2 stuff. And it was, this is the case that was kind of Jim Harbaugh bought cheeseburgers for 2 kids at the Brown Jug and look at the NCAA making a martyr of him and all that kind of stuff. Well, there were NCAA COVID era visitation violations as well, which they take a little more seriously. But that was all likely to be just level 2 stuff. That's like, everyone gets dinged for level 2 stuff. Schools turn themselves in for level 2 stuff all the time. And it's kind of, oh, you've got to go through, more continuing education. And boy, isn't that punishment enough. NCAA continuing education. But what turned that into a level 1 and got them on probation was that Jim Harbaugh thought it was stupid, and therefore Jim Harbaugh didn't cooperate. And Jim Harbaugh thought this shouldn't be a violation, and therefore he didn't cooperate. And well, then if you lie to the NCAA, that turns it into a level 1, especially if it's the head coach. Guess what Jim Harbaugh did again in this case? Jim Harbaugh also thought this was stupid, and Jim Harbaugh also didn't cooperate with this. And guess what? That's not going to help them as a program moving forward. So while we've got you all here, make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. That helps other folks find these shows through some, I don't know, magical YouTube algorithm. Hopefully not the same one that is serving ads to everyone, but we appreciate everyone here. Hit that thumbs up. I know it has been a very active comment section today as well. We appreciate your input and your thoughts and your arguments and the good-natured back and forth between Ohio State and Michigan fans. Always fun in the comments on these shows. And finally, make sure you are subscribed to our channel, youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Hit the bell as well to get notified. I'm guessing this will not be the last live show that we do on this topic or lots of other topics. So make sure you hit that bell so you get notified. If you have not hit the bell for a while, hit it again. Make sure it is clicked, because I think sometimes if you haven't clicked it for a while, sometimes it'll say, you don't really mean it anymore. Well, you probably going to mean it. You have a super chat I want to get to real quick from Wingman Ted. Our postseason awards in jeopardy, Joe Moore, etc. I don't know that I've ever seen. I mean, like, they took Reggie Bush's Heisman away for a while for NCAA violations, and then just gave that back to him. That just showed back up in Heritage Hall at USC just in the last week or so, I think. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I that's probably up to the individual, the organization that awards each of those things. I am not expecting vacation of the Joe Moore Award to be the most consequential piece of whatever this punishment is, though.
Well, and a lot of the none of the awards want to be associated with this. So the best way to not be associated with it is just to move on and not bring it up and not have the award removed, because then you've got award vacated. Like throughout the rest of of time, your Wikipedia page of your award winners is like, no award vacated. And it's like, now we're associated with that. So if you just leave it be, then, what Michigan won the Joe Moore, in 2021 and 2022, gosh, I wonder if it helps an offensive line to know what a defense, to have an idea of what a defense is going to do. I don't know. That's a crazy thought.
Yeah. I'm not, of the many things that I think we probably don't have enough information on yet. I think that that's certainly one of those things that we probably just, general good idea for life. Maybe let things play out before you rush to judgment on anything. That's probably not a bad mantra for lots of other pieces of life as well. Coconut Dream says, nice show, Tom and Tony. Thank you. We appreciate that. Appreciate all of you guys joining us today. Let's just wrap this up real quickly with one quick run through, because again, the number keeps growing. So we're going to run through this one more time, and then we're going to wrap this up in just a couple minutes. Run through the story right now from ESPN, Dan Murphy, Pete Thamel of ESPN. New Michigan head coach Sherrone Moore is one of 7 members of the 2023 football program accused of violating NCAA rules in a draft of the NCAA's Notice of Allegations obtained by ESPN. The draft, which could be subject to change, states Moore could face a show cause penalty and possibly a suspension for allegedly deleting a thread of 52 text messages with former Michigan staffer Connor Stalions in October 2023, on the same day that media reports revealed Stalions was leading an effort to capture the play calling signals of future opponents. The draft states that the text were later recovered via, quote, device imaging, and Moore, quote, subsequently produced them to enforcement staff, close quote. Moore is accused of committing a level 2 violation, according to the draft. Former Michigan staffers, the article continues a little later on, former Michigan staffers Jim Harbaugh, Chris Partridge, Jannard Robinson, and Stalions are also accused of committing level 1 violations, the most serious category in the NCAA's enforcement process. The school also faces a level 1 violation charge, according to the draft, due to its, quote, pattern of noncompliance within the football program, close quote, and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. Former coaches Jesse Minter and Steve Clinkscale are also accused of recruiting violations unrelated to Stalions in the draft. And, we've said this several times already. That sentence, the school also faces a level 1 violation charge, according to the draft, due to its, quote, pattern of noncompliance within the football program, close quote, and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. That's it. That should be the, Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor size headline for this story, where it's, that's it. That's the story. That's where the potential consequences are going to come, the significant potential consequences beyond probably just an individual person is there's already 3 years probation for Michigan through the previous violations. Now you got this, and they're accused of a pattern of noncompliance within the football program and institutional efforts to hinder or thwart the NCAA's investigation. To me, Tony, that's where this starts and ends in terms of if there are going to be significant program punishments, that's where it's going to come from.
Yeah, and the institutional efforts, basically, and we mentioned earlier, the lack of institutional control. This is overt institutional control, basically trying to stifle the investigation. And why try to hide things unless you already know about them? And like maybe you can hide stuff after you find out. You can certainly try to hide facts. The article then later on goes to talk about Chris Partridge allegedly pressuring a player or an intern or somebody to not be forthcoming, a player to not be forthcoming. You see here on the screen the Central Michigan stuff. Like, there are just so many pieces to this, and you can parse each one, but it still comes back to 7 staffers and the university. And it's hard to parse a university when we're talking about each of these things, because they all add up to the NCAA not being happy with Michigan at all right now.
Yeah, so this is obviously going to be a story we will continue to follow. Okay. I thought I was going to wrap up. Now we get a super chat from Doug Shepard Sr. Doug, thank you very much. Says, share this video with friends and family. Yeah, I mean, we do our best to be, follow the information and follow the evidence where it leads. And that's what we're trying to do here again. And we're trying not to get too far out over our skis in terms of what this is all going to mean down the line. We're just telling you where we think there are, this story could be within that certain sentence that I've now read, I think 27 times on the show. That feels like that's where the story could be. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that show. I think probably at least half of the folks in the comments enjoyed the show. Half of the folks were probably extremely mad. I just saw the name Howard Cosell scroll by at one point, and I thought, I bet I know the context there, where people, what was the number one reason people watched Monday Night Football? Because they loved Howard Cosell. What was the number 2 reason they watched Monday Night Football? Because they hated Howard Cosell. So, we are happy to be your Howard Cosell on this story, no matter which side of it you are on. Again, we try and be as down the middle as we can and give you as much information as we can, and kind of let you know where we expect things may be headed, or what to kind of keep an eye on moving forward. We will continue doing that for you here at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And of course at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. And boy, there's a lot of news around the Ohio State football program as well. We've had live shows wrapping up the first 4 days of Ohio State fall camp. Live shows from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center every single day. There's been a ton to talk about there. There's going to be much more to talk about in the coming days and weeks. Get interviews, I think, every day this week, or just about every day. Have a live show for you Monday evening around 6 p.m. So make sure you are subscribed to our channel at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Make sure you hit that bell so you get notified when we do a live show. Sometimes our schedule is a little unpredictable. That is the best way to make sure you get notified whenever there is news. And, whenever the final notice of allegations comes out. Again, this was just a report about the draft. Whenever that comes out, I'm guessing there will be new information there. We will be doing another live show whenever that happens, as well as all these interviews, all these practices, all that kind of stuff, as we count down the days to the 2024 college football season. Almost here, less than a month away. I can't wait. Guessing you can't either. Reading bylaws is all well and good, but we all do tend to like watching actual football more. We'll be doing all that for you all fall at BuckeyeHuddle.com and youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. All right, deep breath. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.